It is both an honor and a privilege to take part of what has already been an amazing evening. Many of you here tonight have inspired, challenged, and celebrated me over the past 7 years. These relationships have what brought me here tonight to speak with you at this Golden Jubilee. On February 26, 2014, I sat right here in Hewitt Union's ballroom, just about as far as Kiana is from me, nervous, yet grateful. I was the president at the time, and it was the night of our dinner. As many students and board members alike know, once you make it past the variety show, it's as if you've made it through a marathon. One that requires something a little stronger than water to get you through the shenanigans of the after party. For me though, I was nervous as I knew my job was far from over. My board and I invited alum to both speak and host throughout the weekend. As I watched on as Damaris Dunn and Andre Fields pulled from the theme, Rebirth of the Renaissance, I was shook, for lack of a better word. I knew I wanted to be on the other side of the podium, but I wasn't quite sure when. As though following up two of the greatest contributors of SUNY Oswego wasn't enough, I didn't write my speech that night 4 years ago. And management asked me to go with a little more conventional approach this time. So here we are. Remember the times. Last year, my mentor passionately flipped the theme on its head, pleading for us to step away from the table of the oppressor, pool our collective knowledge and power together, and take a seat at our very own table. The year prior, my very best friend eloquently charted the parallels in our everyday lives to that of our ancestors, from our dances to the underlying beats in our music and the clothes that we wear today. Tonight, though, ladies and gentlemen, I plan to bridge the gap. I want you all to walk away understanding, as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. And throughout the night, you'll hear me repeat the phrase, because as they say. And I'd love if you guys repeated, it takes a village. So let's practice. Because as they say,
it takes a village.
Because as they say,
it takes a village.
All right, we're ready. So boom, right? My first year on campus, thank God only a handful of you knew me then, was a time of much introspection. I had to find out who I was going to be here at SUNY Oswego. Was I going to continue to run with the students that I came here with from high school, or was I going to step out of my comfort zone and make connections in the Black community? I attribute my decision to getting involved to a few people I still hold near and dear to me today. Miss Ashley Freeze, who was my RA at the time in Oneida, who had encouraged me to model for BSU's Alana scene. Me? Model? You must be out your god, because I didn't even know where to get a haircut at that time, let alone stand on a line to step with other people. You see, weeks later, Miss Chelsea Hammond and Mr. Wilbert St. Hilaire caught me walking through Campus Center, minding my business, when they literally grabbed me and brought me to their tabling. See, I wasn't sure if I wanted to make that commitment of joining BSU yet, but for me, this is where the journey began 7 years ago. For the union, it started during a time in 1968 when it wasn't necessarily safe to go into town alone. Back when students had to stand on separate lines to pay for their books, in the late 1960s and early 70s, African Americans seldom made up more than 3% of the students at traditionally white institutions. Many of the Black student unions were being established through necessity. The resources that these Black student unions provided offered support to the students and faculty alike who were dependent on one another. These individuals came together despite their differences, quite honestly, for protection. Mr. Bobby Simmons partnered with a diverse group of students that worked to support one another and set out a plan in case of emergencies, recognizing a void on campus. In fact, the organization's mission was, as stated in our Constitution, is to provide support and encouragement to Black students, faculty, and staff, as well as community members, developing unity, pride, and leadership through education of our beautiful and colorful contributions of our people to society, both locally and abroad. A mission that so many times has been battle-tested, but proven to be true. The way I see it, an organization can only sustain 50 years if their purpose is genuine. Because as they say,
It takes a village.
and a great deal of this illustrious history of our organization has been sustained by a man who has been a stronghold for BSU throughout its existence, as both a student and advisor of the organization for nearly 20 years. Mr. Howard Gordon. A champion that was there alongside Ms. Kathy Santos and Mr. Ted Adles, the president at the time, when this thing didn't have legs to stand on. When I spoke with Howard, he recalled the evening when over 80 students of the union came together, walked into a student association meeting, and demanded the same respect as the other organizations on campus, enlisting funds in order to celebrate the then ordained Black History Week. From this point on, in the fall of 1970, BSU was officially recognized on campus. You see, around this time, students all across the country were the leading forces behind the civil rights movement. They were the heartbeat of organizations like the Young Lords, Students for a Democratic Society, and of course, the Black Panther Party. We as a society often lean on young folks to do the work. Even to this day, folks like Philip Agnew and Sierra Taylor have forged a light for our struggle by the way of the Dream Defenders and Missouri's Concerned Student of 1950. These are the testaments to the power that you as community hold in our society. Fun fact, one of the most extraordinary events in SUNY Oswego's campus actually occurred during the spring of 1971, when the union invited arguably the world's most famous person, the late, great Muhammad Ali, electrifying a packed union ballroom and later meeting exclusively with BSU members. And this is just where the list of names begins. Over the decades, BSU has yielded speakers like Reverend Jesse Jackson, Joe Clark, Dr. Cornel West, Johannes Kunjoku, Kwame Ture, and Louis Farrakhan, to name a few. But of course, as we all have experienced, BSU is much more than the big names or the civic engagement. It is a vehicle with a come-as-you-are attitude that brings us through this college experience. It is a home away from home. It is a collection of ideas, opinions, and feelings. It's playing spades in the Hewitt Student Center between classes, jonesing about the program the night before on our way to Mackin, or even throwing up the fist when you run out of pose ideas, as I tend to do every once in a while. BSU is a network of like-minded individuals who share a common interest because, as they say,
It takes a village.
for a little over 30 years now, one of the communities that has exemplified this common interest and cultivated the growth of minorities is none other than Alana. And I hear you whispering over there, Maggie, 32 years to be exact. A coalition of the cultures that make up our community, Alana is much more than the fashion show, but a week of leadership workshops, educational programs, and inspirational alumni guests like Rafara Mutombo, Terea Conyers, and Niall Pope. My apologies to Ernest Washington and good people over at Campus Life, but it's really the only homecoming we acknowledge on this side. I've had the unique opportunity of being a part of all three phases of the conference and have benefited from the relationships that are a product of the varying roles. Relationships which I cherish still to this day. My often partners in crime, LSU's former president, Kaylina Rivera, my big sister, CSA's former president, Darlinda Brown-Lee, and a name that might be familiar to some of you all, Billy Keys Adebayo, ASO's former president. Born from the Lead Center, spearheaded by Tyrone Holmes, Howard Gordon, Roosevelt Muhammad, Grace Makupa, and now Magdalena Rivera, Alana has been an integral part of many students' first experience at this university and with leadership initiatives, allowing them to be enriched by the various ethnicities that make up this institution. The Alana organizations recognize and support one another throughout the year, even when they're the busiest. See, the thing is, when you join BSU, you join a family that casts further than your executive board and further than even this college. One just as dysfunctional as any because, as they say,
It takes a village.
Empower the process.
Empower the process.
Power to the process.
Empower the process.
Empower the process.
Power to the process.
Yes, sir.
I think at every dinner I've attended, there's usually a point in the evening when the hosts walk around the tables and ask what blackness means to individuals. See, Depending on when you asked me that question, I would have answered it in a couple of different ways. As a freshman, I was searching for it, knowing I was raised as a black man, but simply with less access to pickup games and a younger brother to bounce movie references off of. As a sophomore, I had seen examples to generally know what I was looking for. I was already on the board at this time and had to learn hundreds of names and faces around the campus, and I began to find my way. What really stuck with me, even to this day, is that on the very evening I was elected as executive director, I was told, "You aren't black enough to be president of BSU." Okay. By my junior year, I was convinced that I had found it. I coveted it, I bragged about it, and quite literally stood beside it. This was around the time that I understood that everyone knew and appreciated that aforementioned blackness in very different ways. They wore their blackness differently, maybe because they knew it better, I figured. Throughout that year, I would spend hours researching for programs, finding ways to explore our culture through history, business, literature, and the arts. I stood taller, my voice was deeper, my ancestors walked with me. You couldn't tell me nothing. During my final 2 years in college, I sought to be an ally and defender of others' search and display of blackness. My role again had changed, and being a part of soundboards for cultural programming and inclusion efforts, not only locally, but throughout the SUNY system, fostering a so-called village of folks who would be tasked and prepared to do the work long after I walked the stage. I had come from a place of deprivation. Today, though, I experience everything through the lens of my people, the Millie Rock, the clapback, Black Twitter gills, and that's two for your mistakes. Y'all know I showed up to Black Panther last week in all black with my black afro pick to match. You would have thought I was straight from Wakanda. But seriously, as my friend D. Ray McKesson says, I love my blackness and yours too, because as they say,
It takes a village.
Our voices, our story. Our voices, our stories.
Our voices, our story.
Our voices, our stories.
Our voices, our stories.
As I spoke with folks about what BSU meant and what it stood for on campus, a common theme stood out. This organization by nature and by name represent the black students within the community, the tone, but more clearly, the voice of the students. From the annual Marches of Silence to the Caramel Awards, the union opens the door from everything from constructive dialogue on race relations to concerns when auxiliary services starts cutting back on them chicken patty days. We recognize it, guys, come on, I don't know where they went, but we know what you're doing. The union, sorry. What is so valuable about our voices is that they are unique and ever-changing. Our weekly meetings are less of a contractual obligation with the headquarters for both disagreements, and I just wanted to piggyback off of what she had said before. In 2010, a journalism student by the name of Kwame Bell felt as though our collective voices weren't truly being heard. J. Cole was set to perform for the spring concert that year, and opinion pieces written within the Oswegonian had students claim his music wasn't the right fit for our university due to his use of guns and vulgarity. Listen, I don't know. I don't know. At this point, Kwame felt he had to come with the receipts. Following a letter to the editor, he partnered with BSU and started a publication to rival the university's flagship newspaper, entitled The Voice. Serving as an outlet for book suggestions, poem, and Fashion Week posts, BSU's The Voice was born, later to be directed by Kiana St. Louis and Yesenia Torres in the years that followed. You know, a wise man once taught me the difference between management and leadership. He taught me that management, they'll keep the lights on. They will, for what it's worth, maintain. Leadership, though, they'll show us why we needed the lights in the first place and where they will be most effective to fill the room. What's unique about leadership is that it must be intentional, with passion, and with purpose. It isn't simply a title, and it doesn't always revolve around responsibility. It is the process of influencing those around you to be better than they thought they were yesterday. It's the process of influencing those around you to grow far beyond their perceived limitations. This man, Michael Pistella, coincidentally has been part of the proverbial village that has not only challenged me, but the Black Student Union to grow for over the past 10 years. So thank you, Mike. I say this to say the power is in our hands to create the stories which accurately express our lives. Our voices and collective efforts have forged new organizations year in and year out. Oswego's chapter of the NAACP, AB Side, and of course NABA. As well as organizations like Fashion at Oswego, Amen, and Kingston Curls, to name a few. I'll tell you, if it's worth it to try, it's worth it to fail. If there's no path, create one. You are more than just students going through the motions. You are the legacy. You are Black excellence. Because as they say,
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
Takes a village. It takes a village.
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
So right now, I'd like to adjust the spotlight to the backbone of the union and, quite frankly, the majority of the multicultural organizations that make up our campus, present day. I want to thank all the beautiful melanin-infused, naturally glowing queens in the room, not only for holding the union down, not only for holding me down, but for holding our communities down. It isn't news that Black women face unparalleled racism and disrespect in our society. Roman famously reminds Olivia Pope, of which our parents have been telling us since we were born, you have to be twice as good to get half of what they have.
Good job, bro.
Back when women didn't have access to the roles in the union that they do now, the positions on organizations like BSU and LSU were originally held by all men. It's no lie that we live in a patriarchal society, but let thy record show. Since the year 2000, 15 women have held the position of executive director for the union. So, clap that. So right now I want to take a second to honor all the women in the room, because you are still the leaders of our tomorrows and the foundations in which we stand today. I encourage you to embrace your Blackness. Be unapologetically you. Go get what you came for. Because I know you don't need me to tell you, but no matter what you do, someone will have something to say. So do it anyways.
Right.
Just like T'Challa in Black Panther, I've always been surrounded by amazing, beautiful, and talented Black women. They have built me up to be stronger than I could ever imagine with their love, support, and selfless leadership. Between you and me, they're the true superheroes of this story. To my brothers in the room, I say this with the strength to love you whether I know you or not. The time is now, as it often is, to transform yourselves and your ideologies. During your college years, you are afforded the opportunity to be both invincible and vulnerable. You are afforded the unique experience of fine-tuning your passions and establishing accountability. You have here every advantage to change your circumstances. We often fear, myself included, being ridiculed by our peers if we put the time into what is truly important to us. Heed my warning. The time is now to work on what makes you a unique contributor to this world, because, contrary to popular belief, opportunity doesn't just come for those who wait on them. And if you want to get a fair shake when you leave here, you must understand. Long gone are the days in which you are rewarded for doing the bare minimum. I'm asking you to be extraordinary, not because you're following someone else's blueprint, but because you've crafted a blueprint of your own. I read an article some time back that claimed that you are the books that you read, the films that you watch, the music you listen to, and the people that you meet. Well, I'm a firm believer that what you surround yourself by, you become. So choose wisely. The time is now, because if you do not now dare everything, the fulfillment of your time here will amount to dreams deferred. Use your resources and collaborate with those around you until you have the tools in which to pass on to others. Because as they say,
It takes a village.
which leads me to my next critical point, and how I truly believe the ideas of the process and the village meet at a crossroads. It takes a village to raise a child, but any one of us can be the light that directs someone who may need it most. Mentorship, I believe, is what kept the fire shining for the BSU. It has long been a glaring need in our community. The concept and motto, lifting as we climb, is a testament that of how we can succeed and reach new heights. When I was an underclassman, many of my friends were older than me. They taught me early on the lays of the land. I stand in front of you today only because I too had to learn from some of the great influencers. When I joined this organization, my president, Bonnet Wright, had a philosophy that she would empower us to use with the skills and opportunities to take her position at any given moment. A philosophy that, above all else, speaks of longevity and whispers of legacy. As I got older, I felt it my duty to pass on the knowledge and access to others as it was done for me. As an agent of change, I believe that I would be able to reshape the campus, one student at a time. I wanted to be more than just a mentor, but a friend to the folks that looked to me for advice, for recommendations, and when they had jitters in campus life, doing career fairs. When you get to see potential in someone, it's important, I believe, to reach back and challenge it, constantly and constructively. Open the door in which individuals can shine the brightest. And so, what was unique about the experience of taking on mentees was that no one approach worked. I had to learn the different personalities, learning styles, and performed forms of communications for each individual. When I look back onto it, I know that watching these students succeed and then to have people look up to them was the greatest pleasure to me. And the irony is that you all continue to inspire me. I know I'm running low on time, but I just want to say thank you to the young men and women, and you know who you are, for trusting me to help guide you through the college experience and beyond.
Remember the times. Remember the times.
Remember the times.
Remember the times.
Remember the times.
Remember the times.
I would be remiss if I didn't talk about adversity and the times that the organization has had to overcome over the past 50 years. Every February, we have 28 days or so to celebrate our history. We celebrate it because, as we know, much of it gets lost on the way to the textbook publishing rooms. As we look back on the times, we must also confront the trials and tribulations of the scholars and academics during those times. This shared experience that is BSU reminds us of the students from 50 years ago who persevered through the Watts riots, civil rights movements, and death of our historic leaders. 40 years ago, as the racially charged war on drugs tore families apart, and Michael Jackson's Thriller brought them back together. 30 years ago, when the riots in Crown Heights shook Brooklyn and the Ronald Reagan era shook the world, as Reverend Jesse Jackson ran for office and rap lost 2 kings over the span of 1 year. Approximately 20 years ago, when students watched Hallie secure the bag and the levees break in Louisiana. But finally, just about 10 years ago in 2008, we were rewarded with the very first Black president of the United States of America. 8 years we were in power, author Tinashe Coates claims, but during the same time, my peers and I were tasked with organizing through the lynching of our brothers and sisters live on CNN while the words non-indictment echoed. The birth of the Black Lives Matter movement, Baltimore uprising, the Charleston 9, Flint, Michigan, and Charlottesville. Students are living through some of the most divisive times in our country's history, which is evident with some of the current events going on at our sister school, SUNY Plattsburgh. BSU is as important now as it was 50 years ago. As Mark Twain says, history may not always repeat, but it sure does rhyme. Amidst all of this, students of the Union, very often first-generation students, prevailed through classes where no one looked like them. 7 hours away from their homes without the delicacy of social media and unlimited data. There were the years where boards were certainly divided, changed leadership during semesters, and faced drastic budget cuts, you name it. But for 50 years, we have overcome, not just survived, but succeeded. E pluribus unum. Out of many, there is one. Though we walk different paths, our storylines run concurrently. When speaking with alum, they reminded me of what was going on during their time as a student. But when I asked about the Union and what it meant, I could hear the electricity through the phone. See, the thing is, there's no such thing as a long time ago. There's memories that matter and those that don't. For many of you here with me tonight, our time on BSU can never be forgotten. But tonight, we not only celebrate the students of yesteryear, but we celebrate you, who in your own ways have built a better BSU. This is your campus. This is your union. 50 years marks something special, and it's evident in the turnout and support that we've garnered this evening. However, we must understand the enormity of the task that lies ahead. At the start of every fall, we as a campus are faced with what we deem to be a new board. Though each board is entrusted with passed down secrets, programs, and events from those that came before them. The May Day basketball tournament, 1980s, Road Bounce, 1993, Caramel, 1995, the Peace Walk, 2010, Marifa, 2013, the Young, Gifted, and Black Summit, 2016. Let's face it, I remember the times, but I also know the times have changed. The executive board members that have come after me are strapped with a new set of rules, with a new cast of constituents. I encourage you to challenge the old ways of thinking. While the 50th chapter of this organization's history has only just begun in 2018, the script that will write the next 50 years are in your hands. How will you contribute? In closing, I want to thank those in the room that have been a part of the 50 years that BSU has stood at SUNY Oswego. If you hear the name of your organization, I ask you to please stand and remain standing. If you've ever been a part of the Student Association, the Latin Student Union, the Asian Student Association, the Caribbean Student Association, the African Student Organization,
I guess I just...
2.5,
All right.
Gospel Choir, Image Step Team, NABA, our faculty, staff, and administrators.
Everybody.
And please stand with your fist raised if you have ever been a part of SUNY Oswego's Black Student Union.
Tu sabe.
I leave you with this. I am just an accountant. I am just a man. I may not be able to change this campus any longer, but maybe I can inspire someone who can. Who can? Because as they say,
Takes a village.
thank you and good night, everybody.